Hi, this is Scott here. Keith's been kind of busy the last couple months, so I just wanted to go over features and changes in xLights since last year. So far in 2021, we've had 19 releases as of the middle of June here. I want to talk about the 19 releases of this year, and then there's one of last year that came out after Keith's last video. The first new thing, this is in 2020.56, this is the last release of last year. Gil added the terrain functionality. So what that is, it's only available in 3D, but if you go to 3D mode here, there's now a new object called terrain, which you can add. So first, let's turn off our grid line because that sometimes can get in the way. But if we go in here and add a terrain, what this allows us to do is we can now create a custom ground plane. So if you have hills or you have like a slanted yard, this allows you to edit this and mimic your yard. So to actually edit it, you have to enable it here with this checkbox. And then this allows you to select and then click and drag. And you can basically model the hills and the valleys of your yard. There is this option here for brush size, so just doing one at a time is kind of annoying. So you can go up to 5. And then when you do this click and drag, now you'll be doing whole sections of your yard. So Gil did a video on this with more in depth because there is things like adding a background image and adjusting the size and color and stuff like that. But just for this video, that's kind of the basics of it. Just a way that you can model your yard. The next thing, so not really an enhancement, but Keith removed the delete all button from the controller tab. So historically there was a delete all button that let you delete all your controllers. That kind of led us up to the issue where people were accidentally deleting everything. If you want to delete your controllers now, you have to highlight all of them, and then there's a right click delete, and this will delete all your controllers. There's no longer delete all, but there still is a way to delete them if needed. Third thing, this is something I added. So in the submodel dialog, I made a bunch of different changes to the submodel dialog and a couple other releases too. So I'm just going to kind of talk about them all right here. And then we'll just skip over them when we get there. So what I did in the submodel dialog, the first thing that's kind of noticeable is I redid the buttons. There used to be 9 buttons. Now we're down to the 3 primary ones, like add, delete, and copy. And then the 3 bottom buttons are actually, if you click them, they actually have submenus now for all the features. So the first button is the action button. It's called the edit button, some of the older revisions, but now in 19, it's the action. When you select this, there's generate slices, which the feature's been in there before. It allows you to generate sub-buffer slices of your model. So if you have a matrix and you want to do 5 slices, you could do the generate slices. And the new functionalities I added were these flip and shift. To mimic what you do in the custom model, sometimes in custom model people wire stuff the wrong way and they have to flip it. Well, to make it to match the custom model, I also put those options in here. So if you flip your custom model, then you can come in and flip your submodels so they'll match what you did. So there's horizontal and vertical, and then there's shift, which is similar to the custom model shift, which will take, if you want to take what is that node 1 and make it node 20, you just do this shift and it'll basically shift all the nodes around. And then reverse makes your string backwards. So whatever was node 1 will become 100, and whatever was 100 will become 1. These operations, the bottom 4, will be done on all your submodels. The import options, these are similar. There were 3 import buttons before, and now I just put them all down here. This allows you to, if you make submodels, if you have multiple mini trees and you make submodels in one, then you can just, select this option and you can copy the submodels into your second mini tree. So from model basically is a model in your layout. From file, you can select submodels from an xModel file. And then the import custom model overlay is an option to, if you had a matrix and you wanted to overlay a snowflake on it, this would allow you to import that and then you could have on your matrix like a snowflake in the middle. Some other minor things. Now when you select one of these, it'll actually highlight the whole model over here now. Instead of just the top row, it actually does all the rows. I also added an option in the newer release. You can select multiple submodels. If you hit right-click Join, what this will do is it'll take those 3 models and it'll combine them all. So before I had 3 eyes, now it'll make a new model that's all 3 added together, and you can call this like all eyes. And it's just a quicker way. If you do the individual parts, you don't have to do the main part again. I also added an option. It's in the draw, or it's in the select or draw model. It allows you to invert this. Like if you had all the eyes and now you want to make a model of the body without the eyes, you could do a copy, and then you could go into draw model, hit this invert button that I added, and it'll basically do all the other nodes. You can hit OK, and now I could have eyes, and then I could have all, and you can rename it like all not eyes. And that's just a way that I can basically now have my 2 submodels that I can sequence separately, and it's just the invert, easier way to do the invert. So that's about all I've really done to this dialog. Added a mode column to FPP Connect. So if you go to FPP Connect now, when it finds your FPP, there's this mode, and it'll tell you what mode it's in. So if you have a like master remote, you'll know which one's your master to maybe do your audio and your media and your UDP outputs to. And the other remotes, then you can, you don't have to do all those additional things. So just a quicker way to kind of see your layout of your controllers in your yard. The last 3, they're in the sequencer here, so let's just make a new sequence and kind of show those. So the first thing that Keith added was sorting to the display elements by start channel. So if you go to edit display elements, what this is basically saying is when you right click, there's some sort options. There's some new ones now. He added the start channel, and I think later released he did the controllers. But if you do by start channel but groups at the top, this will sort this list here by start channel based on your layout tab. And if you do controller ports, this will sort it by the controller tab. If you have models on port 1, they'll go first, and port 2. So just some quicker ways to sort by different types. In the latest release, which I'll just show now so we don't have to come back in here, there's also an option if you select one that isn't the master view, you can now sort the same as the current master view. So if you have a view that's called main and you want to sort it the same as the master view, there's now an option for that as well. And that's just in 2021.19. That's in there. So just some no sort methods. Gil here on the single strand effect, he added some new bounce from middle, bounce to middle. So if we do a single strand and we put this on all arches, let's do per model default just so it's easier to see. Now there's some new chase, bounce to middle, bounce from middle. You kind of see it bounces to the middle from the outside, and then bounce from middle just starts in the middle and bounces to the outside. So they're similar to each other. One just starts in the middle, one starts on the outside. So those are the new things Gil added. And then in the twinkle effect, he added a new algorithm for how it twinkles. So we'll get the twinkle effect here. And let's put it on bedroom matrices. So by default now it uses this new algorithm, the new render style, which seems a little bit more random compared to the old one. So the old one's still in there. This one is I don't think is as random. So the newer one's a little bit more random, and I personally think it looks a little better. So that's the default now is the new one. If you like the old one, you can always go back to the old one as needed. So that's it. That's all of in 2020.56. So let's go to this year, 2021.1. So just first thing here, when you have the input and output uploads are linked, disable the buttons. So what this is in the controller tab. There's this option in preferences where you can link your controller upload, input, and outputs. So by default, this is disabled, and whenever you make a change to like your Falcon, you need to hit upload inputs and then upload outputs. When you have them linked like this, now you only have to hit the upload outputs and it'll do inputs and outputs. So the change Keith made is just when they're linked, it disables the upload input button, so only the upload outputs is enabled. So there's only one button to click, and you don't see both of them. So Gil added the ability here to sort the timing tracks. So if we go back to our sequence here, do edit display elements, it only you can only do this in the master view, but now there's an option. You can hit the up and down arrows, and it'll move the timing tracks up and down here, and they'll be saved when you save the sequence. Gil also added value curves to the Twinkle effect. So as I was kind of showing, the Twinkle effect here, there's now value curves to the number of lights in the Twinkle steps. So if you want the number of lights to ramp up, they'll ramp up, and so just some more options there. So in 2021.2, there's a couple different things. First thing here is the I did the preview itself, but Keith did the backend code for this. So now in the effects presets dialog, there's this preview pane. So up here now, when we select an effect, in the background it'll generate that effect on this matrix, and it'll show it in real time. These are all stored as GIFs on your disk. So in your show folder, there'll be a folder called presets with a bunch of GIFs in there. If you ever want to just delete them all to clear it out, then the next time you come in here, if there's not a file found, it'll regenerate it. So that's what you see. If you click one, it generates it at first. That's creating the GIF file. And then the next time you select it, it'll it just loads the previously saved one on disk. There are some other things. It'll be later in the release, but I'll just show it now. Dave Print added some drag and drop stuff now, so you can drag and drop these around a little bit easier and move stuff. You can also drag and drop the groups. I don't really have many groups. And you can drag items between groups. So that'll be later in the changelog, but we'll show that now since we're here. I talked about this submodel dialog. I consolidated the buttons to those drop downs. I already showed that. In the visualizer, Keith made it work with USB controllers. So now if you add a serial type controller, you can select the lore controller. If you do auto layout, auto size, you can come into the visualizer and you can drag and drop in here now with these USB type controllers. There's no way to upload, but just a way to use the visualizer with like the easy config with those USB type controllers. I can't really show this, but there's the custom model generator, which just takes like a video file, tries to auto generate a custom model based on a video of your prop. If it misses one, it kind of just guesses now the location between two. I kind of showed this in the submodel dialog here. You can export a submodel as an X model now. So that was one of the drop downs. You can export, so you can do the node numbering manually. .3, we'll go. So the first thing, there's an option to open a second instance of xLights. So I'm on Windows, so I can't show it. but on the Mac now there's an option that says Open xLights, so you can open a second window. So you can have two windows of xLights open, so you can copy and paste effects and do importing. So it's in the Tools menu at the bottom here if you're on Mac OS. Added prefix and postfix to generic serial. So there's a type that I added last year. So if you have a serial type device, there's this generic serial. I added this so we could use it with like Arduinos and stuff. There's like a Vixen sketch where people were trying to control relays with an Arduino, and I got it working with that. Keith added the ability to do prefix and postfix. When you're sending serial commands, if you need like a certain command before and after the data, you can put those in here. This supports hex code or just regular strings. Keith added this functionality, so now when you load a sequence and it's missing like video files or pictures, it'll show you on startup. I have a sequence here that I know has this issue. So now when I load a sequence, that's just because I don't have the media, but now you'll get this dialog that says missing assets, and any pictures, videos that are missing will now be listed here, and basically tells you can do, if you want to come back and see this again, just do tools check sequence. So anything that's missing will now pop up on load. So then if files are missing, you can come get them. So this picture is missing, and now you can go bulk edit and find them. Keith had the ability for some random options for the bars effects in the VU meter. So do a new sequence. The VU meter. So there's these different effects that are bars, which if you have timing effect bars, this lets you specify the number. So it would basically take your buffer and divide it into 6 bars. And now what you can do, I'll just put some timing tracks in. If you do timing event bars, since I have it divided into 6, it'll basically go down. Every time there's a timing mark, it'll move it down. Now there's a random, so now it'll just pick just a random bar. So a bar just basically dividing the buffer into 6 for how many have you selected, and now it's just picking a random one. So there's like timing event bars, there's level, random. I don't have audio, so this won't do anything. But same with node onsets. There's all these options now for random on top of just the regular bar. Yeah, Keith added that. So Keith added the ability to create a state definition from the DMX effect. So this allows you to set values for, let's say we have DMX here. You can set all your channel values. If you want these values, whatever they may be, there's this option at the bottom to save as a state. You can call it whatever you want. And then now when you go to the layout and go to the states dialog, there'll be that the values we set are now the state. And this allows you, with the state effect, you can reproduce these values. So in the color here, if you do force custom color and set red, green, blue all as the same value, when you're using a DMX type device, it'll use this as the DMX value. So when you're using the DMX effect, we set it to 76, and now 76 is stored in here. The other one I think I set around the same, 78. Then we can use the state effect, and it'll use those DMX values that are stored in these forced custom colors. So it's a way that you can just basically make states from the values you predefine in the sequencer. So if we drag down the state effect now and selected that state, that test, it would do those same exact DMX values that are in that DMX effect now. They're stored in that state. So in 2021.4, I added the ability, so when you're exporting models, it'll attempt to also export the groups that are attached to that model. I have the ability now to select which ones you want it to export. So if I export this model, call it something on my disk, there's now this option to say what groups do you want to export with it. If there's a group that only this model is in, like for submodels, those will be checked by default. But if not, you can then just check any group you want. There should be right-click options to select all, and then you could highlight some and select them as well. So then when you do the export, it'll include those groups. If you hit cancel, it just won't include any groups. It'll still do the export. I know that was something that someone reported as a bug, but under the hood, it still exports even when you hit cancel. So if you hit OK and export, it'll so when you export, it'll have all the groups in there when you export. So if we find that model that I just created, if you open it with Notepad, it'll have all these model groups that we selected. Will be in there now. So that's that feature. In .5, Dave Pane, he had the ability now in the import dialog to import the zip files directly. So I think this is a pretty cool feature. So let me show it. When you're doing an import, it's always best to make a new sequence. So I'm going to make a new sequence. I'm going to use my new favorite one from PPD, which is Count on Christmas. We'll just hit done. So now there's an option when we do an import. If you have it on all, or you have zip selected, you can now select, when you do an import here, we can actually select the zip file. And the main advantage of this is the zip file contains the pictures, videos, everything needed for the sequence. So when we select this, it'll extract the zip, and it'll add another option now that we can set where we want those pictures, videos to be saved on our PC. Now when we import, it'll put all the images from that zip file in this image directory. It'll put all our videos here in our video directory, and similarly it'll put the shaders in your shader directory. And these are all selectable, so if you don't want to use the defaults, which it does like this, you can select, if you have a video folder, you want all your videos to go in, you can select that and it'll put all the videos from the zip into there. One other thing it does is because it knows about the layout in that zip file, it'll also highlight the, it'll change the color of the groups to be blue to match the blue groups over here. So by default, xLights is always shown on the left, which is these are the models of your current layout. Any group would be blue. Now any group that you're importing from is also blue. Another thing that Dave added, you can now select multiple over here, and if you double click, it'll populate all of them. There's a way now, if you have something that you want to go to multiple items, you can highlight them. That'll be it's in the changelog later, but I just thought I'd show it now. The blue highlighting I also added for regular XSQ files if the RGB effects file is in the same folder. So later that's in the changelog as well, but that's also in there now. But for zip, this is just kind of a quicker way that it'll also do your media and put everything in the right folder for you. And then after it does the media into your show folder or wherever you import it, it'll update all the effects. So if I load my mapping, so I have a mapping here for PPD. Now I can just hit OK, and everything should map over. from the zip. And if we find an image somewhere, maybe this sequence doesn't have one. But now all these images and everything, they were mapped to that import directory that was in there in the options, and everything just came over. We don't have to worry about fixing paths or anything. It just worked kind of automatically with the zip import. So in 2021.6, Kevin added some new transitions. So he added circle, shatter, and swap, and he also added the ability to reverse the star transition. In the layout tab here, there's the option for the transitions, so let's just do 1 second. And you can see the swap if you had something underneath. It'll basically swap between the two. You can kind of see one goes away, one comes in. There's shatter, which basically like just explodes, and then you'll see the thing under it. And then there should be circles, which basically just makes a bunch of circles as it disappears. For the star, now there's a reverse. So I believe if you select the reverse option, it'll do the opposite. So instead of doing this with it normal, the star kind of goes in. If you do reverse, now it goes out and it'll show what's underneath. So that's what Kevin added. I added the ability to multiple select submodels in the faces. So in the faces dialog, there's been this right click option. So if you wanted to add a new face and if you already had this specified as a submodel, there's been this right click option where you could do import submodel, and you could just do like the bulb. You could select the submodel you already did. Now you can select multiple and hit OK, and then it'll import those nodes so you don't have to type them in manually all the time. I just made it so you can select multiple of those now. I can't really show this, but there's the Philips KaiNet. If you set up one in xLights now, it'll be uploaded to FPP. Dan added that. No changes in .7. .8. I kind of showed all these from Dave Pane. These are the import dialog where you can do the multiple highlighting, the colors and all that. That's those are those features. Effects preset. This is the drag and drop. He did the sizing, so I kind of showed that already. Dan added the option if you're running xLights on one of the new M1 Macs. There's now an option to download the Queen Mary plugins. He made a custom build of it for the M1s. .9, I can't really show this, but a bunch of the dialogues now, and you'll see up here as well the visualizer. They made the colors work, so if you're in dark mode on a Mac now, the colors palettes actually work and they look better. I showed this in the import dialog. You can select multiple. You can highlight multiple rows and then click it and it'll populate it. Same with on the Mac here. If the headers in the sequencer tab here are too dark to see, it should now try to fix that. So if you're importing, if there's not enough contracts, so you won't have like a black on black where you can't read anything. .10. So I had the ability to export your layout, models, and the wiring as DXF files. And you can also export models as STL type files. So what this allows you to do is in your layout, there's now a right-click option that's export layout as DXF. So you can export this, just hit save. And now if you go to your show directory, there'll be this DXF file, and you can open this with the CAD software. So I have the e-drawing software on my computer from SolidWorks. And it'll take your house and export it as a DXF, and it puts some information on here, so it'll tell you what controller and port it is. And then if you wanted to, you could print this with like a plotter or your CAD software. And there is settings for different layers. So if you want the text to go away, you could turn off that layer. If you just want the nodes, you could turn off the nodes and just have the text if you wanted that. But this allows it to then, you can resize it, edit this if you have software that allows you to edit. And you can print it a little bit easier. There's also options to just do an individual model. So you can export this as a DXF, and you'll just have a DXF of the model. And you can also do it on the wiring view. So in the wiring view, you can right-click, export as DXF. And then, if it's a little bit easier, you can open this with your CAD program, and it'll show the wiring. It's the rear view. It'll show you how to wire stuff. And same, this has layers, so you can turn off if you don't want to see everything. You don't want to see the dots or something. It'll make that a little bit easier. There's also an option if you want to export a model. So you can export a model as well as an STL or a VRML file, this is like a virtual reality type. But if you do an STL, you can then open this with a CAD viewer, and you can see the model as a bunch of little boxes. So if you want to bring it into a 3D design program or something and try to see it a little bit better, the big box is node 1, but I was kind of just working on different export types, so I added some different options in there just to play with for people to use if they wanted. .11. So I can't really show this too well, but there's now options in the key bindings, which is like your keyboard shortcuts. So on Mac now, you can select control. You can do the Mac control, which is like the raw control. If you're on a Mac, it'll also show the icons up here. I guess Mac control is different than regular control, but on Windows, these are the same. So if you use control versus Mac control, it'll be red in Windows, because in Windows, these are the exact same key bindings. It's not a huge deal to have multiple ones in here. I'll just use the top one. But now on Mac, you can have separate control and Mac control. But on Windows, it'll just be the same, because they're the same under the hood for Windows. So in .12, Old Salt, I think this is Tony from the Zoom room. He's been working on a bunch of the shaders. So if you have the shader effect, now when you do download, Tony's been going through and organizing these and kind of cleaning them up some. He's been going through and making some of them better for xLights, optimizing the settings for xLights, cleaning them up because some of them, when you clicked on them, there was no image over here, so he was generating images. So he's been working on that. So Keith, in .13 here, he improved the visibility of the playback waveform. So he added this option, I believe, last year. If we make a sequence with an audio file, there's a right-click option where you can filter by different frequencies. So if you do the bass, this in theory will show the bass notes. And so he added this custom now that you can also just filter by whatever frequencies you want. So he did some editing on that to make this a little bit more easier to see. So in .13, Kevin had this ability now that certain shaders can react to music. So some of the shaders now, if we add the shader effect, I'm going to see if I can find one. But there's some audio ones now that if you enable these, they should react to the music. So now they're actually, this shader, there's some custom shader code in there, because shaders are basically little programs. This will react to the music in real time. There are some adjustments here. And I know something that Tony was also working on is all of them now should have this ability to do offset and zoom. So if you adjust, the shaders have this concept of like global names or global space, like XY coordinates. All of the shaders now should have these offset and zoom sliders that'll allow you to edit them so they'll adjust on your layout. These should be global settings. I know Tony was working on that with a lot of them to make sure they were working and verifying. So that's a new feature in there too. I added the Pixie 2 controller. So in the controller drop down, if you select lower, there's the Pixie 2 now. So I just added that. I kind of talked about this. Now in the import, when you're doing XML or XSQ import, it'll also load the RGB effects XML file if it's in the same folder for the blue group, the names to show up as blue. We're up to 15 here, we're almost done. Keith added this new multiply brightness blend mode. How this should work. Underneath the hood, what it does, if we have multiple layers now with this blend mode, it'll take the brightnesses of the two effects, it'll multiply them by each other, so each color, RGB color, is a 0 to 255 value. It's called brightness here. It'll basically now multiply them together and then divide them by 256. So this is very similar to minimum. It'll basically, when there's two colors that are the exact same, they'll come out as the resulting color. And then anywhere else where they're not the same, they'll be more dark or black. So it's very similar to minimum, but it takes two values, times them by each other, and then divides them by 255. So you can get different effects, different color blends. So he calls it multiply, but it's actually brightness in the drop down. So .16, I added the ability to do WLED upload. Now in the controller tab, you can add a WLED type controller. I have some built-in ones. There's just generic WLED, which lets you select the ESP8266 or the 32, or I added some of the Quindor modules. And this allows you to use the visualizer, and then you can just upload, and it'll upload all your settings to it. I did a video kind of showing it. It also supports like brightness, some of the controller settings as well, like the brightness and protocol and some of the other stuff are all in there. Those should be all uploaded as well. I had the ability to join submodels. I kind of already showed that in the submodel dialog. So in .17, the only thing I added was this progress indicator for rendering. So if you're on Mac OS or Windows, now if you're in the sequencer and you do a render all, if you look down here in the taskbar, it'll show the progress. So it's really quick because I don't have much effects on here, but it'll show down here now in Windows. It'll be a green bar when it's rendering. So if you have xLights rendering and you're another app, you can kind of see the progress down there now. So you'll see it turn green. That's all that really is. Okay, so version 18. So version 18, this is the reason there was a lot of time between releases here is Keith and I were working on rewriting a bunch of features in xLights. So in version 18 here, Keith added the support for the Falcon V4. He also, with the V4, and now it works with the Hinxpix as well, we can support multiple or more receivers. So historically, we could only support 3. Now with the V4, you can support 6 smart receivers, and on the Hinxpix, we can do all the way up to 16. But in xLights now, we had to change the backend to work with more of those smart receivers. I don't have a V4, but I can just kind of add a dummy one to show. But if you do an F16 V4 and you enable smart receiver, we'll just do for smart receiver, and we do auto layout, auto size. Now when we go to the visualizer, we can drag the arches, and this will be, in theory, one of the smart receivers. We can set the smart receiver. So on a V4, you can do up to 6, so now we have A through F. If we had a Hinxpix, this will go through A through whatever 16 is, N, I think. There's also options for how many to cascade. So historically, you would say you wanted A, B, C. There was a couple different options. Now you'd say I want it to be on A. And then if you have like a multi-string mega tree, you could say you want it to cascade down 4 remotes. So if I had my pixel tree here, let's drag this off. We can say it's on smart receiver A, but we want to cascade down 4 remotes. Since I don't have that many strings, it actually only uses 3, but we can set it to 3. So now what this is doing is basically saying this is going to be smart receiver A, B, and C. It's going to cascade down them all. There's also an option to cascade down the ports. This changes it, so now strings 1, 2, and 3 go down the remote instead of going. So string 1 is A, 2 is B, 3 is C. When we didn't have that set, 1 was 1A, 2 was 2A, 3 was 3A. So when we have it set, it actually goes down. This is better for the Hinxpix. So if you have a Hinxpix type receivers, I would enable that option by default. But there's just some new options to make that more compatible with the newer smart receivers. Keith also added, there's some options. Now you have this kind of, let's get rid of this. But once you drag one item on here, one model, it'll be pink. And then now if you double click another one, it'll just keep adding them to that spot. So if you're doing a lot of serial, this is kind of a quick way so you don't have to click and drag all the time. You can just double click and keep adding them over and over. So what I added, you can now do key bindings for F13 through 24. So a standard keyboard only goes to F12, but there's these special F keys for like barcode readers and other devices. I know people were using them like with an iPad app, so I added support so you can use those keys. Keith added the ability now in the key bindings. You can set the audio speed and like the tags. So in the sequencer, there's this option where you can put a tag. If you right click on the top, you can do 0, 1. Now there's options to jump between those. So in the key bindings, you can set up, if you wanted to custom next tag, prior tag, that's down here. It'll jump between those tags. You can make a shortcut. And then these are all the speed settings in the audio menu. So now those can be controlled with the keyboard as well. for people who want to map all of these to different keyboard shortcuts. So Keith added that. I added support for null pixels in the WLED upload. I added shift selected nodes to the custom model editor. So this is, sometimes people will have models where they forget a node, and there's always been a right click option that lets you shift, but this would shift all of them. So what I added, if you only wanted to shift a select portion of the node, so let's say you missed a node after 200 and you just wanted to shift 201, you can now just select all these and then do shift selected, and this will let you just shift all those nodes by 1 or 2 or whatever you need to do. So I just added this shift selected option now, so you can just shift portion of the nodes. If you like miss a node or something and you just want to shift the end of your model, you can do that now. So that's all this shift selected is. Keith updated the Queen Mary Vamp plugins to use the newer version. We were linking to 1.7, now there's a 1.8. In the arches, there's the ability now to set the starting location. So if you're doing a layer arch, let's say you have an arch, you do layered arch, you do 2 layers. Now there's options to do inside, outside. So if you want the wiring to be on the inside arch or the outside arch, there's now more settings there for that. So there's this ability here when dragging an effect on a model name, now it'll highlight. So it's kind of, you probably saw it a little bit, but now when you drag an effect, you see over here, it'll, the color of the row will be highlighted. So if you're way far on the sequencer, you don't know exactly what row it on, it should highlight so you know. Now that was added. And I talked about the Falcon stuff. So .19 is 2 days ago. FPP now, if you're running FPP 5, these controllers now support end null pixels. So you should be an option for end null pixels here. So you can set up end null pixels if you have an FPP type controller. All my controllers are FPP based, so I have that option. So it should be enabled if you have a Falcon V4 or the FPP now. That'll be enabled because V5 supports that. I showed this in the display elements a while ago. There's an option to sort the same as the master view. So that was just one of the right click options. I added to the select effects, now there's what I call the color filter option. So if you go to View, Windows, Select Effects, this window allows you to basically select different effects, and then you can bulk edit these or edit them from there. I now have this option for color. So if you select red, hit OK. So if I select bars and select red here, it'll show all of them that have red in it. And if you hit Control, you can multiple select these, and now you could do a bulk edit, bulk change the colors, bulk do whatever. Now you want these to be a different effect. There's a select color. There's a sensitivity slider. If it's all the way to the right, that's basically wide open sensitivity, so it'll select any effect. So if you hit reset, it always goes back over there and goes to black. So when it's all the way open, that's basically any color. So the default when you hit reset is any color will be selected. So I added that. Keith added the ability in FPP Connect to upload sequences to the V4. I don't have a V4, so I can't show that. So Keith added an indicator now when your audio devices cannot be used for playback. In the sequencer, if we can't play audio to your sound card or some sound device, now the waveform here will turn red to be an indicator that you're having audio issues. Because when it can't play out the sound card, there's when you hit play, the timer just won't move. So now the waveform will be red to indicate that. That's all the changes through 2021.19. If you have any questions or need any help or with xLights or with any of these new features, I'm in the Zoom room most nights. I can assist if possible. Keith is also in there once in a while. So if you need any help, anything it's confusing, just let us know. Thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.